Joseph Robinette Joe Biden Jr., aka Pops, Pedo Pete, the Big Guy, Robert L. Peters, Robin Ware, J.R.B. Ware, and my chairman is the authoritarian kleptocrat and dictator of the United States. Biden identifies as a proud black woman and has been described by a close confidant as an egomaniacal autocrat. His own Justice Department labeled him as incompetent and unfit. Vladimir Alexandrovich Zelensky, also known as Adolf Zelensky, occupied the position of dictator of the Kiev junta and Ukrainian NATO puppet regime, a racist Russophobe, neo-Nazi collaborator, kleptocratic book banner clowning cargo pants, and head of a Western stooge regime. Considered a madman by many, presented to Western audiences by the neocon globalist propaganda matrix as a combination of Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and Winston Churchill, Zelensky gained public acclaim on Ukrainian television by playing the piano with his private parts. After having suffered 400,000 casualties in the NATO war in Ukraine, the former comedian sidelined Ukraine's top military commanders to assume command himself. He has been characterized as the ultimate narcissist and has repeatedly called for global thermonuclear war. Russian President Vladimir Putin has called Zelensky a disgrace to the Jewish people. Dr. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, JD PhD, affectionately known as Uncle Vova, is the Christian socially conservative statesman and president of the Russian Federation, a position he has held since 2012 after serving as prime minister since May 8, 2008, and previously serving as president since December 31st, 1999. Putin holds a law degree where he specialized in international trade and a doctorate in economics focusing on energy and particularly the field of oil and gas. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization is a military alliance consisting of the United States and 30 vassal states. It was founded by 12 countries after World War II on April 4, 1949, to counter the Communist Soviet Union. NATO is the only military alliance that stations nuclear weapons on non-nuclear nations' territory. NATO has bloated to 32 member countries as of 2024, more than 30 years after the Soviet Union dissolved. Despite calling itself a defensive alliance, NATO has never fought a defensive war. NATO has engaged in wars of aggression, violating the territorial integrity, attacking and invading multiple sovereign states. Since 1991, NATO has become a promoter of globalism, neoconservatism, imperialism, neocolonialism, and gay parades, along with the rest of the homosexual agenda, which Russia and the Bible opposes. To justify NATO's continued existence, the most extreme Russophobes of the former Warsaw Pact states and in the West have taken control of its policy direction. To join the alliance, NATO members essentially cede their foreign policy sovereignty to the leftist deep state in Washington and London and become vassal states on immigration, gay parades, and priorities of liberals. Under NATO doctrine, while any member state can commit aggressive acts of war against a non-member, if the non-member retaliates against the NATO member's territory, the non-member risks war with all members of the alliance. Additionally, some non-member states have been equipped with weapons and training to wage war as if they were member states. No provisions have ever been articulated for member states that go to war with each other. The European Union, EU, also known as the Fourth Reich, is an anti-democratic experiment in globalism combining very different cultures and nations into an auxiliary defense bloc of the NATO alliance consisting of 27 European countries. The EU was formed in 1993 with the ratification of the Maastricht Treaty through its predecessor, the European Economic Community, was founded in 1957. It is not the same as Europe, though most nations from the continent have joined the EU, but Britain left in 2020. The EU seems to cause more harm than benefit, as it did by adopting a Lebensraum policy. to incorporate Ukraine into the EU, right? On February 28, 2022, rather than de escalating the Russia Ukraine conflict. As a set of institutions, the EU has more powers over its member states than their citizens than other international bodies. Many of its competencies are supranational, above the member states, rather than intergovernmental, between them. Despite having a legal personality and sovereignty in agreed areas, it is not regarded as a federation or state in its own right. Rather, it stands somewhere between these 2 points. Unlike most democratic unions that are formed from the grassroots up, the European Union was imposed on the people of Europe from the top down by oligarchs and bureaucrats. 15 member states use a common currency, the euro. The EU is moving in the direction of eventually becoming a politically unified federation, something which many of its leaders continuously support. There is no EU military. Each nation has its own forces, but nearly all are members of NATO, in which the US has a preponderant voice and provides a disproportionate share of funding. The EU is a driving force of global economic and political integration, but Hicks sees 3 problems with the EU: policy gridlock, lack of popular legitimacy, and the democratic deficit. He notes in substantive terms, the EU is closer to a form of enlightened despotism than a genuine democracy. In addition, on February 5th, 2000, John Laughlin indicated in The Spectator that the European Union's entire purpose was to subject Western Europe to Marxist-Leninist / Marxist Trotskyist thought. With the EU's facilitation of the European migrant crisis, Eurosceptics and native populist movements regard the EU as a totalitarian bureaucracy. In 2016, the UK voted to leave the EU, a process termed Brexit, making them the first country to leave the European Union. The decision was finalized on January 1st, 2021. Best arguments against homosexuality. Top 10 arguments, and there's 11 of them. Gun control is a term used by liberals when advocating laws that violate the Second Amendment of the US Constitution. Gun control is designed to disarm people by restricting the lawful purchase, ownership, or carrying of guns under the guise of public safety. Studies show that increasing lawful access to guns results in less overall crime, but leftists push gun control because it increases the dependency of voters on government for protection while disarming citizens from any self-defense against violent crime or tyranny, such as genocide. Supporters of gun control need only to look at leftist dictatorships such as Venezuela. The political effect of gun control is to shift voters leftward, and hence gun control is pushed hard by the liberal media and leftist politicians. In the United Kingdom, which already had the strictest gun control in Europe, leftists demanded control over 120,000 deactivated guns, although their activation and use constitute only 0.04% of all gun offenses there. But leftists want gun control because fewer guns mean greater dependency on the government. Gun control is a form of doublespeak. Video games are addictive, train young mass murderers, and promote liberal talking points or ideas. By exploiting addiction, one article says that the global video games market is to reach $293.2 billion by 2027. Additionally, another article states that in 2022, in Japan, that 17% of children between the ages of 6 and 12 spend more than 4 hours a day gaming, up from 9% in 2017, with a similar jump seen among those between the ages of 12 and 15. As to liberality, video games, even ones exported to Russia, increasingly promote the homosexual agenda, contrary to the policy of Russia and elsewhere. Violent video games are particularly addictive for boys and young men. Additionally, video games are associated with dropping out of school, and the video game industry is criticized for exploiting its workers. Hearts of Iron 4 is a video game developed by Paradox Interactive. The game is a real-time strategy which focuses on the conflicts of World War II. The Hearts of Iron community has been known to be overrun by communists in recent years. The World War II setting of the game attracts those who believe in those kinds of ideologies. The Biden junta, officially the Biden-Harris junta, also referred to by some as the Biden regime, seized power on November 4th, 2020 in a nationwide rigged election by the Democratic Party, disenfranchising the will of the voters and the American people. The junta began receiving federal taxpayer money on November 24th after the head of the General Services Administration received death threats against her, her family, staff, and pets. One of the junta's first acts was to execute a warrant on former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who led challenges to the integrity of the 2020 presidential election. The junta's first actions were borrowed right out of the Nazi playbook. Like the Reichstag fire, a false flag attack on the US Capitol building was staged as a pretext to curb human rights and free speech. Junta leader Joseph R. Biden appointed Maoist Anita Dunn as presidential advisor. Dunn had been fired by the Obama White House in June 2009 after publicly expressing admiration for Maoist genocide. Dunn was behind the cover-up of former Biden aide Tara Reid's rape and sexual assault allegations. The appointment appeared to be a payoff. Due to the dear leader's debilitated mental state, 4 weeks into the junta, members sought to relieve the junta leader of sole responsibility to launch a nuclear strike. The 2021 Capitol protests, also known as the J6 FBI false flag attack on the US Capitol, or Fedsurrection, consisted of a diverse group of American patriots of different races, backgrounds, and cultures protesting the Electoral College certification of the fraudulent 2020 presidential election, who were entrapped by the FBI on January 6, 2021. FBI assets dressed as Trump supporters were inside the Capitol before the Capitol Police opened the doors and welcomed citizens inside the building. 8 days before the disturbances and 7 weeks after President Trump's alleged defeat in the 2020 presidential election, a Gallup poll survey found President Trump to be the most admired man in America. Despite supposedly losing by 7 million fraudulent votes, the J6 false flag attack apparently was an inside the Beltway deep state effort to tarnish that image and put the majority of Americans on notice that they now were living in a corrupt police state.